Okay, let's dive into one of the most important books ever written about money. And here's the twist. It's not really about spreadsheets or picking stocks. It's about what goes on right up here in our heads. We're going to unpack Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money to get at some really surprising truths about how we deal with wealth.
And it really all starts with this one question. Seriously, what do you think is the most important financial skill? Is it, being a math whiz, understanding the markets? Well, it turns out it's something a lot softer and a lot more human than you'd expect.
And to show you what I mean, let's kick things off with a story that pretty much flips everything we think we know about financial success completely on its head. It's the story of a simple janitor and a high-flying executive.
So on one side, you've got Ronald Reed. He was a janitor, a gas station attendant, no fancy financial training, just lived a really simple, quiet life. And on the other side, Richard Fiscone. This guy was the total package. Harvard MBA, a top exec at Merrill Lynch, retired in his 40s to live a life of pure luxury. I mean, one of these guys had every single advantage you could possibly imagine.
Well, when one of them passed away, he left behind a fortune of $8 million. So who do you think it was? The executive, right?
Nope. It was the janitor. Ronald Reed quietly built up his millions with two incredibly simple skills: patience and consistency. He just saved what he could from his modest paycheck and put it into solid, blue-chip companies. And then, he just waited. For decades. And the executive? Well, he went bankrupt. His whole lavish lifestyle was built on a mountain of debt, and he started making these incredibly greedy bets that completely wiped him out in the 2008 financial crisis. So, think about that. The difference in their education was huge, but the difference in their outcomes? Well, that was all about behavior. And that gets us right to the heart of this whole book. Financial success is a soft skill. What you do, your patience, your humility, your discipline is so much more powerful than what you know, even if you have a fancy degree.
But, it isn't just about behavior. We've also got to talk about two forces that are just as powerful, but way harder to pin down: luck and its twin sister, risk.
Just think about Bill Gates for a second. Now, obviously the guy is a genius, but he also had this incredible, unbelievable stroke of luck. Back in 1968, he just so happened to go to Lakeside School, which was one of the only high schools on the entire planet that had a computer. The odds of that? Literally 1 in a million. But here's the thing. Gates wasn't alone. His best friend, Kent Evans, was right there with him. In fact, Gates himself said Evans was the best student in their class. They were basically inseparable, totally obsessed with that computer, and they had big plans to start a company together. They never got the chance, though. Ken Evans died in a mountaineering accident before he even graduated high school. The odds of that happening? Also about 1 in a million. It's the exact same force, luck, just pointing in two totally opposite directions. As Morgan Housel puts it, luck and risk are siblings. It's this crucial reminder that not every success story is purely about hard work, and not every failure is because of laziness. The world is it's too complicated for our actions to be the only thing that matters. So while we can't really control luck or risk, we can control our own behavior. But what happens when that behavior goes off the rails? What happens when somebody who has everything decides it's still not enough? This brings us to the story of Rajat Gupta. He was the former CEO of McKinsey. He had a net worth of $100 million. I mean, he'd made it, right? But he saw his buddies on the board of Goldman Sachs becoming billionaires, and he got jealous. He wanted in. So he started feeding insider tips to a hedge fund manager, a crime that sent him to prison and completely destroyed his reputation. Warren Buffett just summed this up so perfectly. Gupta risked the things he had and absolutely needed, like his freedom and his reputation, for something he didn't have and absolutely did not need, which was just more money. It proves that the hardest financial skill in the world is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Okay, so if chasing more is a dangerous game, what's a more reliable way to build real wealth? Well, it's a force that's incredibly powerful, but for most of us, it's almost invisible. I'm talking about compounding. All right, take a look at Warren Buffett. We all know the crazy number, right? Over $84 billion. But this chart, this reveals something just mind-blowing. If he'd started investing at 30 and retired at 60 like a normal person, even with his legendary returns, his net worth would be under $12 million. That means 99.9% of his wealth showed up after his 60th birthday.
So what this shows us is that while Buffett's skill is investing, his real secret, his superpower, is time. The magic of compounding isn't about getting the absolute highest returns, it's about getting pretty good returns that you can just stick with for the longest possible time.
But see, sticking with it, that's the really hard part. And that brings us to this super important distinction that almost everybody misses. Getting rich and staying rich are two completely different skills.
And what's so fascinating is that these skills, they're almost opposites of each other. Getting money usually means you have to take big risks, be optimistic, and really put yourself out there. But keeping that money, that requires humility, frugality, and a healthy dose of fear that everything you've made could be taken away just as fast as you got it.
The story of Jesse Livermore is such a tragic example of this. The guy was a certified genius at getting rich. He made the equivalent of $3 billion during the 1929 crash. But he was terrible, absolutely terrible at staying rich. He just kept making bigger and bigger bets until, poof, it was all gone.
This reminds me of this powerful idea from the writer Nassim Taleb. He says you can have the greatest investing edge in the whole world, but it's totally useless if you don't survive long enough to actually use it. You have to avoid ruin at all costs. That's the foundation of everything.
So, let's bring this all home. After all that, what is the most valuable financial skill? Well, it's not really one single thing. It's more like a collection of behaviors.
It's about realizing that real wealth is what you don't see. It's that gap between your ego and your income. It's about managing your money in a way that lets you sleep well at night, whatever that means for you. It's about using money not just to buy more stuff, but to buy control over your own time, which is the highest dividend money will ever pay. It's about planning for things to go wrong, because they will. And above all, it's about survival. Just staying in the game long enough for compounding to work its magic. That's everything.
So, I'll leave you with this last question from the book. I want you to take a hard look at your own financial life, your goals, your strategy, your day-to-day behavior. Are you playing a game that's actually suited to your personality? A game that you can realistically stick with for the long haul? Because when it comes to the psychology of money, that's the only game worth playing.